Alright guys, it's Sunday, back at the shop. Wanted to try to finish up and basically get the car ready to the point where I can take it around the block, go for a test drive. The main thing that I left out when I test started the car was the coolant. So that wasn't an accident. I was just kind of, really curious to see if this car would start up on its own. And it did, and that's great. So now I'm at the finishing parts of getting this car ready to go out for extended test drive. We have actually Toyota coolant in stock, which I was pretty excited to use. And I forgot that these come as a concentrate. So I'm actually gonna head down to the auto parts store and get some distilled water. One other thing I want to talk about is how important it is to start a car up with a fully charged battery. I wish I learned this earlier in life. I suppose my dad tried to warn me and tell me about this, but maybe I was young and just didn't want to listen to him. I learned the hard way that when you start cranking a car over and if the battery's not really in tip-top, charge shape, you can really do some damage that starts to manifest itself quite quickly. And a lot of that just happens from the battery charge level dropping down to a certain point. Let's say you start the car and it's, the battery's like 50% charged. When you crank it over, you pull a lot of juice out of the battery and the charge current drops down. Now, if you have it on a battery charger, it can slowly and safely bring the charge level up without boiling off the acid. So in other words, like if you put too much heat into the battery by charging it, you can literally boil off the chemicals inside that are required to make the battery work. I've got the radiator mostly filled up with the 50-50 mix and the Toyota coolant concentrate. It's almost at the top of the radiator, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open the garage door, start it, run it for a bit, kind of let it circulate, and we'll keep adding coolant to it. Let's see how it goes. All right, so it started. Temps are coming up. Don't think we need this note anymore since it's got coolant and oil and an ECU. One of the few times they get to benefit from the stock we have. I used to use Motul, however, since my engine is a little bit smoky and gets a lot of gas into oil, I have to change it pretty frequently. So I switched over to Shell Rotella. Some people use this. It's actually a diesel oil. However, it's got a lot of zinc in it, which is really good for aggressive cams, such as the ones I have. It's been working out so far, but again, it's just because I've kind of got a bit of a tired engine. I think once this thing actually gets rebuilt, I'll be going back to the good stuff. Got a Toyota genuine filter. Again, we try to use OEM parts when possible. These are like significantly less than 10 bucks on our store. Some people grab them a few at a time when they place orders. These come pre-greased from the factory, so it's just take out of the package and slap it on. Just super nice. Highly recommend this. This is definitely my go-to filter, and we try to keep them in stock at all times, so just check it out next time you're doing an oil change. Definitely recommend the Toyota filter. While I was in here, there's a couple things that I wanted to point out. A long time ago when I first met Ezekiel, he took me in as a customer, and I was telling him that I was having trouble with my my dipstick popping out because, like an idiot, I built this 7AG back in 2012. 13. Started getting it running in like 2015 or so. But like an idiot, I took the junkyard motor. Again, I was in college, it was pretty broke. But I tried honing the bores and just re-ringing the 20 valve pistons, literally the same pistons that came out of my 20 valve bottom end. Re-ringed them, honed the block, and put it together. Well, I've had blow-by issues ever since then, so that was a mistake. If I had just spent the extra, maybe let's call it $1,000 to have it, bored and using new pistons that were oversized, would have saved me tons of headaches. Never doing that again. And I highly advise you to bore out the engine if you're doing a rebuild. Ezekiel made this dipstick holder, a one-of-one Ezekiel special that he made in his garage. Keeps this thing from pulling out if there's extra, pressure on it. I made a custom Radium based valve cover relief, which allows extra blow-by to go around this hose and is caught in this Radium catch can. That solved a lot of the issues, although it's not perfect. The engine could also be getting a little bit worse over time, but that's made a huge difference. So I haven't really had to require this quite as much, but I definitely appreciate what he did for me, and that's been very helpful. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is there's this old green looking thing here, and that's a part that I drew up and had 3D printed on it was a professional machine. It wasn't like a, it wasn't like a homebrew special. But anyways, the same part that we saw in our store, it's a dipstick holder that allows you to use the original 20 valve dipstick with a 7/8 block. It just makes up for the difference in the height of the block. But I'm using the same part that I drew up, same one that we sell on the website. Yeah, this particular 3D printed part has lasted ever since. We do have the Battle Garage race alternator pulley down there as well. Good fun with that. Mechanically, like engine wise, it should be ready to go for test drive. I'm just going to check some things like, how is the alignment? I have not even looked at that since it came back from the frame shop. So I'll just get some toe plates. I'll get a bubble camber gauge and just roughly see if we're in the ballpark. But yeah, hopefully I can actually take her on the block and just make sure all systems are go. Yeah, overall looking okay down here. All right, so while I was down here, going over my notes, and I did see that my steering rack dust boot has been split for some some time. I was also looking to see if I had any worn inner tie rods. I have run into that before. This may affect more like the road racing guys or like, you know, heavy autocrossers more than like the drift folks. When road racing with those ARCHIVAL tires, there's a lot of load that's transferred onto these inner tie rods, and they tend to wear out pretty quickly for me. These actually are okay. I was surprised, so we must have changed it at some point and I forgot to update my notes. I did grab some Megan Racing ones off the shelf. I've been meaning to kind of try these out. We do have a inner tie rod from Megan, and what I like about the Megan ones is the actual ball joint is larger than the OEM one, and maybe when I take it off we can compare that. What that means is the load capacity of this should be higher than just the generic aftermarket ones that I have on the car. We also have some outer tie rods, which are physically larger, but they also drop down I'm gonna say the pivot point of where the steering knuckle goes to the outer tie rod. And what that does is when you have a lowered car, it helps to correct this angle back to closer to how the OEM intended. Because what happens is when you have a lowered car, the angle starts to tilt upwards and you can start to get some weird, you know, bump steer, but also just you'll have less leverage on the steering wheel. So it'll require more force to turn the wheel because you're pushing at an angle versus totally horizontal or perpendicular with the wheel. Really the biggest thing that I need to address, actually, since the tie rods are in decent shape, is replacing this, you know, old and now hard steering rack boot. We actually do have OEM Toyota steering rack boots on the shelf, so I was able to just go and grab those. Maybe once I pull them out you guys can see the difference, but the rubber's like, it's just super pliable, you know, kind of nice and fresh. It's hard to describe, but OEM rubber pieces tend to feel more malleable than even the aftermarket ones. There's something about the rubber, the neoprene mix that they use that's feels superior than a lot of the, you know, generic aftermarket brands. So, you know, these do cost quite a bit more. This is probably about 2 or 3 times more than what our, you know, generic aftermarket boots would cost. But, you know, for me, I'm busy enough that for me to come in here and change those racks boots again, it's probably not worth it. I just want to get the OEM piece on there. Hopefully it'll last another 20 years. So that's kind of the philosophy I've been kind of adhering to. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. Okay, well, I had a decision to make and I decided to not change the inner tie rods, even though I'm this far, just because every time you make a change on something, there's always a chance that something's going to come up. There are other more important things I need to address on the car, especially since I've found that these inner tie rods actually are in good shape. They must have been changed at some point. When I changed them out, I selected a higher quality brand that seems to be holding up better. Probably just means that these were made with tighter tolerances. Materials were hardened or maybe using a better grade of material. But those small things can really make a big difference in the performance of a part that's being pushed to the extreme. Just to give you an idea what kind of differences we're talking about. So this outer shell is 40.28 millimeters on the reinforced Megan inner tie rod. The aftermarket replacement part is 37 millimeters. And you can also see, this also isn't as, you know, very scientific, but the opening here, which, you know, the ball is required to fit into, this one is measuring at 26.81. This is 27 a little more than that, just about 28 millimeters. So the actual ball that goes inside there is physically larger. On top of that, you can just see that the diameter, the steel insert is physically larger on the Megan piece, just ever so slightly. But, you know, I think these parts are kind of just right at the edge of being able to handle these kind of sustained loads. So I think this is just enough to make a more durable part. Now, since I do have the tie rods already off to change the boots, I think I'm just gonna put these adjustable outer tie rods on at least, so I can adjust for bump steer. You know, just try this product out. The other thing I did while I was in there is I cleaned off the old grease, which had, you know, dirt and debris in it. So I'll repack that. I'm gonna do the same thing for the driver's side. And my steering rack's a little bit too tight. There was some play on center before, so we tightened up this adjustment, which brought the rack physically closer to the pinion, and that tightened it up. But we might have gone a little bit too far. So other people noticed, myself have noticed, that when cornering at the limit, the steering effort's a little bit too tight. So I'm gonna back that off. But I think those are probably more important than changing out the inner tie rods right now. So for this steering rack adjustment, I've loosened this up with a large crescent wrench. At least on my car, once this is loose, this part actually, this is the part that puts the preload on the rack. This actually turns pretty easily. Even though I don't have the right tool, I'm able to turn it with just, you know, putting a wrench in there. But so what I'm doing is I'm loosening this up to go see how the steering effort is both on center and then off center. And the reason that that's important is the racks will wear more when the steering wheel is straight up, because that's where the majority of the time you're just kind of going back and forth as you go down the road. And then as you start to turn over the wheel to make sharp turns, the rack will move into an area that's not as frequently used. So it tends to be actually tighter there than directly on center if your rack has seen some miles, which mine definitely has. I'm adjusting this to try to get the on center to be acceptable and the off center to not be too tight. Now, the other thing I want to mention is once I'm done with this, I'm definitely going to mark this with a paint pen, because anything that's steering related, you know, as if you're going on track and you're driving the car at high speeds, you don't want anything like that getting loose. We're actually taking this car to Buttonwillow next, and I'll be honest, that track really scares me quite a bit. There are certain turns that, you know, I will push as a driver, and I've experienced oversteer at like 90 or 100 miles an hour on, you know, Riverside or the turn right after that, and we're talking like pretty large slides. So I do not want anything getting loose or losing steering control, or maybe even causing the car to go off course at those kinds of speeds. So I'm going to be marking this with a paint pen, and as you can see, Ezekiel's been in here before and he's marked things as well. We just haven't made any adjustments to this one for quite some time. Yeah, in other words, since the car is going faster and faster on track, I'm getting a lot more particular about these kinds of things. Maybe as I just, you know, am worried more about my own mortality as I get older. I'm not, you know, I'm not taking as many risks as I did as a kid, and that's probably for good reason. Just, you know, through life experience, you know, bad things can happen. So, but anyways, enough of that. We'll make this adjustment and we'll see how that goes. I've got the car lowered. This is after I've loosened the rack a little bit, and even without a steering wheel, I can already tell this is much easier to turn on center. Yeah, all the way throughout, it's much better. So it's a balancing point, because if you have that adjustment too loose, you will feel extra slop here. If you have it tight, you might feel the rack get tight, as I was. So this is actually feeling pretty good. I'm gonna loosen it a little bit more just to see what that feels like, and then I'll tighten it a little bit more, maybe too much, see what that feels like, and I'll try to find like a happy middle ground. Also anticipating that the rack is gonna wear a little bit more as I continue to drive it. All right, went up to the car, checked the steering, went back and forth a couple times, found a spot that I liked it. Then I went and tightened this guy while holding the insert still, and I tightened this quite a bit so I'm comfortable it's not gonna loosen up on me. And then I marked it with the paint pen. Next time I'm under the car, which is pretty much for any serious track day, I'm just looking at the condition of things and doing a nut and bolt check. But this can help me to verify that nothing has moved. Combination of me doing this and other people helping, and Ezekiel marking things, have a pretty good sense of, you know, what's been torqued by Ezekiel, and also just if anything has moved. And so far, I have not seen a single nut move, but I'm able to know because most of these nuts have some kind of marking on there to identify their position. All right, I got the steering rack boots off the car, and I got the new OEM ones right behind them. And boy, what a difference. These are really hard, dirty, of course, and split, so they're not doing their job. These are super, oh man, I mean, super pliable. Yeah, OEM is the way to go whenever possible. These were so badly damaged that either myself or previous owner, I don't know, long time ago, zip ties were put on just to kind of keep the car going. Now we're gonna be using OEM clamps, and you know, we can finally ditch these dirty old units and use some fresh new ones. So really looking forward to putting those on the car. All right, quick update. Got the new boots on with the clamps, both sides. Wasn't too bad. And also want to point out that I marked where the outer tie rod was before I took it off, just to give me an idea how many more threads I had left, but also to keep track of how the alignment was before I took the outer tie rods off. Just little indicators like that help to speed the process up, so you're not just totally guessing when you change parts out. Well, I just went for the first drive, basically the first time driving with this new front end on the car. The alignment's totally off, that's to be expected, but I could actually feel there's a difference in stiffness on the front. It definitely feels like the old chassis was very tweaked and very soft, and this front end responds, it's just like tighter, feels more natural. This car basically feels more and more of like a real car rather than a drift sled, like every time we do some major update. So yeah, it's good. As you can tell, it's quite late. I'm gonna start getting wrapped up. Those Megan tie rods did not work out. I think I'll do an update on why that is later, but yeah, for now I'm just gonna start cleaning up. But yeah, see you guys on the next one.